Categories and concepts. If you just finished the lecture about language, this should expand your understanding because we're going to talk more about words, how we interact with objects and everyday things. We form mental concepts of categories of objects, which permit us to respond appropriately when we encounter new objects. Most concepts cannot be strictly defined, but are organized around the best examples or prototypes. We'll also find that our discussion about cultural and linguistic diversity fits very well with this because it depends on what your everyday experiences are to determine those prototypes that you learn or encounter. Objects fall into many different categories, but there's usually a most salient one called a basic level category, which is at an intermediate level of specificity. Chairs rather than furniture, or more specifically, desk chairs. Concepts are closely related to our knowledge of the world. And people can more easily learn concepts that are consistent with their knowledge. Theories of concepts argue either that people learn a summary description of a whole category or else that they learn exemplars of the category. Recent research suggests that there are different ways to learn and represent concepts and that they are accomplished by different neural systems. Let's dig deeper. So our learning objectives for today, we're going to understand problems with attempting to define categories, also understanding typicality and fuzzy category boundaries. Thirdly, learning about theories of mental representation of concepts and learning how knowledge may influence concept learning. Let's start with a warm-up. You have some other activities that you'll be doing related to this chapter. But let's start with this one. So first of all, if you get a sheet of paper or sticky note, white space on your tablet, what defines a zebra? Think about a zebra. I want you to think of 3 or 4 characteristics of a zebra. Maybe thinking of the movie Madagascar. The character, think with Chris Rock's voice. Now, if you imagined that particular animal with all the context that I just gave, because you're thinking about the movie, what are the 3 or 4 characteristics that you came up with? Did you think about color, black and white, maybe stripes? What about socks? Smaller than an elephant, bigger than a rabbit. It's a 4th characteristic, maybe 4 legs. Maybe you're thinking about its ears, maybe where it lives. Okay. So what defines a giraffe? Again, think about 3 to 4 characteristics of a giraffe. Now, I think there was also a giraffe in the Madagascar movie, if that helps. I don't know the actor or actress who provided the voice for the giraffe. So if we start again, if we start with color, then maybe you're thinking of yellowish brown, golden, maybe not stripes, but spots. Size, still bigger than a rabbit, smaller than an elephant, definitely skinnier, but a longer neck than a giraffe if you compare. Same climate maybe that the zebra lives in. Maybe they both live in a zoo. Okay. So now, what is this? So I mentioned black and white. Does this count as a zebra? It looks more brown and white. It has stripes, 4 legs. It's got hair here along its back. Maybe that's, you thought about that. Here's the ears. Did you think about this as a giraffe? I said spotted. What is this then? Maybe that's more like what you were thinking about, my zebra. How about this one? That's a giraffe. Okay, what is this? This is a picture of an akupi. It's also known as a forest giraffe, Congolese giraffe, or a zebra giraffe. And it lives in the Democratic Republic of the Congo in Central Africa. It is the only species in the genus Akupi. Although the Akupi has striped markings reminiscent of zebras, it is the most closely related to the giraffe. So interesting. What is the difference between a category and a concept? Categories help us learn and remember information by connecting several concepts that have similar characteristics. For example, the category of a dog has many different types, but shares similar commonalities. Canine teeth, mammals, hair of some sort, 4 toes. Whereas a concept is a mental representation of those categories. Sticking with the dog example, let's say a person who grew up with working cattle dogs, such as a border collie, Australian shepherd, Queensland blue heelers. These types of dogs are that person's mental representation for dog because of their experience with them. More on the nuanced differences between categories and concepts will be discussed below. Personally, when I think about dogs, I think about a poodle. And now I think about the dogs that people carry around in their purses. I also think about Chihuahuas. It doesn't matter. They're small dogs, but I still get this intense physiological reaction, no matter if it has a lot of hair, a little bit of hair, small or big. My experiences had some childhood events that now make liking dogs harder. So now we can discuss and define categories. What exactly is a category? It has been historically thought that categories are well defined with necessary features that are jointly sufficient for membership, meaning a category was clear cut with features that were all example of the category. For example, a dog is a 4-legged animal that barks. However, you can see that this is not always the case. When's the last time you've encountered a dog maybe that didn't bark? or didn't have four legs. What defines office furniture in this picture? Take a moment. So you have to think about what's furniture, what's its purpose, and then look at the items here. Did you identify maybe the rug, the chair, the desk, maybe the shelves? Why weren't the books considered as furniture? So what is a concept? Concepts are mental representations of a category. Now, give a thought again to what you saw in the previous picture. What is an example of your concept of office furniture? Now we have modern, traditional, home offices, due to working remotely, standing desks. So some of our concepts can be very idiosyncratic. It could be related to our means, what we're able to purchase for furniture, the size of our space. Very much dependent on our personal experiences. So look at what you've written down or think back to your concept of office furniture. Did it include the desk? Was there a rug? Maybe there's that clear plastic thing that keeps you from, it protects the rug so that your chair doesn't leave marks. Do you have traditional bookshelves? Maybe you have crates. Creativity and utility probably define your concept of furniture. Next, let's talk about fuzzy categories. We're preparing to do an activity. So you will need a sheet of paper. And we're about to sort a set of words. If you're in a space where you can do this in groups, it can work in 2 to 3. But you can also just do this in a pair. You can sort these words into 2 categories. I'd also like you to then share the categories that you came up with as a part of your assignment. Here are the words, if you're listening: chair, orange, banana, desk, lamp, pineapple, bookcase, pear, watermelon, table, strawberry, and couch. Sort these words into 2 categories. What were your categories? Did you easily sort them into fruit and furniture? Now we're going to sort another set of words. This time, the categories are going to be provided for you. You're going to sort these words into fruits and vegetables. Orange, date, olive, cucumber, pear, plum, strawberry, pineapple, tomato, zucchini, avocado, pepper, pumpkin, and peas. Did you easily sort these into fruits and vegetables? I also want you to think back to language. We talked about priming. It may have been easier to sort the other list of words. We were just talking about furniture. And then if you use the categories of fruit and furniture for the previous list, you may have recognized similar words in this list, again, priming your knowledge of fruits. You may have had some difficulty sorting this into fruits and vegetables because some of these words are not clear or finer grain or typical examples of either a fruit or vegetable. For example, a tomato is a fruit. So you may think about how some things are fuzzy. Some of these items are fuzzy. Let's think of some other objects and what might be prototypical to you. What is the most typical bird you can think of? Most people are likely to say robins or sparrows. What about this? What bird is this? What about this bird? And what about this? These. So let's go back. This is a crested penguin. This is a Ghanaian cock of the rock. And this is a platypus. How are they similar or different? Things that you were thinking about, if you were thinking about a robin or a sparrow, you see a beak here, some feathers. Maybe you see the feather, more of the feather here, less of the beak here. Brightly colored. What about these? Are any of these borderline of what you would call a bird? Categories can be fuzzy and unclear. For example, is a tomato a fruit, gourd, or vegetable? Research suggests that there are a number of borderline items or members of categories that we cannot agree on, and we even change our categorization of these items over time. Another contribution to fuzzy categories is typicality. For example, what is the most typical bird you can think of? Is it a roadrunner, turkey, or an osprey? Probably not. It likely is a robin or sparrow because these are more common and typical of the bird category and are considered the prototypical bird. The farther away from the prototype in characteristics, the easier the example becomes a borderline member or fuzzy category, and indeed may not be a member of the category at all. So what do you think about when you think about a platypus? What are its features? Do you see those in Georgia? Sometimes we hear them referred to as a duck-billed platypus, so maybe the beak is similar to birds. It combines the characteristics of many different species into one. The platypus is a duck-billed, beaver-tailed, otter-footed, egg-laying, aquatic creature, native in Australia. Let's talk more about typicality. What causes something to be a prototypical member of a category? Research suggests it has a lot to do with frequency, how often you encounter the prototype, but has more to do with family resemblance theory. This theory suggests things are typical because they are frequent, yes, but also because they do not have features that are common in other categories. For example, robins migrate, fly, sing, hop around, whereas penguins don't fly. Less common, swim. Wings look like flippers. Typicality can influence how we process information. That's part of our cognition. For example, for prototypical examples, we categorize them faster, learn them before atypical examples, and understand them with greater ease, and say them before atypical examples. Let's think about how are humans different from other species? We talked about before, one of our defining features, our language, being able to vocalize by using our larynx to communicate. What else? Maybe our stature, the number of fingers and toes, maybe. Size of our brains. What similarities and differences do humans, ravens, and chimpanzees have? Take a look at these pictures. If you're thinking it, yes, we all have hair. We all have eyes. We all have a mouth, even though we call the mouth of the raven a beak. We don't have wings. Anything else? We're able to move around just differently. Okay, so we're going to break down our categories. This will be fun and related to another part of your exercise for today's lecture. How we organize objects in the world. Children's first labels for categories tend to be exactly those names that adults prefer. This was suggested by England in 1977. This preference is referred to as a preference for the basic level of categorization. And it was first studied in detail by Eleanor Rosch and her students, Mervis, Gray, Johnson, and Boy's Brain. The basic level represents a kind of Goldilocks effect in which a category used for something is not too small and not too big, but it's just right. So not too small, northern brown bear, not too big, an animal, just right, a bear. The simplest way to identify an object's basic level category is to discover how it be labeled in a neutral situation. Rosch in 1976 showed subjects pictures and asked them to provide the first name that came to mind. They found that out of 1,595 names, that were at the basic level, with 14 more specific names superordinates use. Only once did anyone use a more general name, a superordinate. So let's define these levels. Superordinate is the level in the hierarchy that's very broad and general, with several basic and subordinate classifications. For example, mammals, reptiles, fish, and birds are all superordinate categories because they have basic levels. Mammals can be a dog, deer, cattle. Superordinate dogs can be a Chihuahua, Dalmatian, a Labrador. Subordinate. Basic, this level in the hierarchy is categorized as being not too small or not too big, and how it be labeled as in a neutral situation. For example, a coastal black bear is too narrow, a mammal is too big or broad, but a bear fits the basic level. These are the most frequent level of a hierarchy and are easier to learn that super or that subordinate level. Basic levels are also easier to differentiate, meaning it is easy to tell the difference between a deer, dog, trout, or shark, but more difficult to differentiate between a cutthroat, brown, rainbow, and grayling trout. And then lastly, subordinate. This level of classification is hyper-specific and very narrow when compared to basic and superordinate levels. For example, sharks are fish. Sharks at the basic level, fish superordinate, but there are many subspecies of sharks: lemon, great white, and hammerhead. As part of your activity today, you're going to take a look at an article that was written by myself and my colleague, Lori Bass. It's called Just Ask Me Again. We studied a group of children between the ages of 4 and 5 who were enrolled at a school in the southeastern area within the United States. Schools were in an urban neighborhood, and the children primarily came from homes from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. We gave them a typical standardized vocabulary test where they were asked to look at pictures on an easel. There's a grid of pictures, 4 of them, 2 at the top, 2 at the bottom. They were said a label for a word, or just were told a word, and then asked to point to the picture that best represented that word. So they might hear bed or dog. Most of the time, those words were at the basic level. The words could represent a noun, a verb, or a modifier. We were intrigued, though, that it was very common that kids missed the same subset of items that in particular weren't ones that you would expect due to their age. And we were fascinated about what might be characteristics of why they were missing those particular items. We studied them in more depth to give them a different picture to see if they knew it. And we asked them to tell us everything they knew about the word. One of the most interesting conversations was when they saw a turkey. They didn't get it right on the standardized test, but they told us a lot of information about a turkey. And in fact, their prototype of a turkey was more closely aligned with the bird that you see on NBC, because feathers were spread out. But that's also what a peacock looks like. And in fact, the NBC representation is a peacock. On the standardized test, the peacock had its feathers tucked down, so kids picked a turkey because it was the most closely represented. There's an activity also where you are asked to take a trip to your university's cafeteria or restaurant. Find 5 common objects, including things people are wearing or brought with them, and identify what the basic level category is for that item. Write those down, then determine what both a superordinate and a subordinate category would also be for that item. We're going to talk about theories of concept representation next. Starting with prototype theory. For this theory, we mentally represent a concept based on a summary representation that has weighted features. For example, birds that fly, have feathers, and obvious wings are weighted higher than for birds who swim and have smaller wings and eat fish and have small feathers. In contrast, for exemplar theory, there's close similarity. This theory suggests that we mentally represent a concept based on a comparison to an exemplar. Exemplar meaning the ideal example of the concept. For instance, what is the exemplar for fruit? If you look at this image, it depicts the autumn olive, which doesn't really look like the typical image of an olive that we are most used to. In fact, it looks more like a grape. Let's stop and think. What kind of animal is this? Going back to our prototype and exemplar theory. You come up with a label yet? Remember, for prototype theory, we mentally represent a concept based upon a summary representation that has weighted features. For exemplar theory, we mentally represent a concept based on a comparison to an exemplar. So for prototype theory, you would refer to your summary representation of various categories, then select the most similar, perhaps a lizard. For exemplar theory, we would compare this to our exemplar for lizards and then compare for similarities and dissimilarities. Okay, let's stop and think about one other thing that I discovered on the internet. What is this? And would you use this product? So for prototype theory, we're going to refer to our summary representations of various categories, maybe of squeezable liquids. Could it be gel, glue, jelly? But look at the label. It says Heinz tomato ketchup clear. For exemplar theory, we would compare this to our exemplar for ketchup and compare the similarities and dissimilarities. I'm going to say, how did this become clear? Most ketchup that we use is red. And in fact, if it's been sitting out too long, it'll be a darker red and we don't use it. I'm not in favor of clear ketchup, but would you use it? Lastly, what makes up our knowledge? Concepts and categories are great ideas, but there needs to be a context to learn concepts and categories. This context is knowledge. That is, concepts and categories by themselves have very little meaning, but when you connect concepts to other knowledge, you can create a meaningful connection that is tangible, applicable, and real world. For example, when learning how to operate a tablet for the first time, you likely draw upon your knowledge of laptops, cell phones, and desktop computers. One aspect of our knowledge of categories and concepts is psychological essentialism. Basically, we want to believe that every category has some core essence that causes its features. For example, we often believe erroneously that the core essence of a fruit is that it's sweet. This is why we often miscategorize tomatoes or peas as vegetables. Think about if you eat either one, and there are sweet peas. Does that make it a fruit?